The Initiative for Gender Equality and Development in Africa, IGED-Africa for short, is a non-governmental, not-for-profit organization which is dutifully registered in Ghana since 2011. As an organization, we envisage a transformed Africa where gender equality is fully upheld, human rights are respected, protected, and fulfilled, and the untapped potentials of women and girls are fully harnessed and utilized for sustainable development.
Its mission is to promote gender equality and sustainable development in Africa through strategic advocacy,
knowledge generation, capacity building, peer exchanges,
and policy dialogues to realize a transformed Africa.
So the question is, how was IGED-Africa formed or founded? IGED-Africa is an organization that is led by women, and it is actually one that was established, as already mentioned, in 2011 through a conviction that gender equality is a necessary prerequisite for the sustainable transformation and development in Africa.
Having worked and engaged with individuals and communities facing serious gender inequality and human rights abuses, and having cited and addressed firsthand the discrimination encountered specifically by women and girls at different levels across Africa,
this initiative was built to address gender inequality for a sustainable development on the continent.
IGED-Africa believes that the provision of equal opportunities and resources for women and men, boys and girls is an excellent prerequisite to the full actualization of human rights and development in Africa.
The actual development of a country is highly dependent on how systemic inequalities are addressed, how human rights are fully promoted and protected, and particularly how the rights of women and girls are advanced in the wake of the deep inequalities and discriminations that exist in most communities on the continent.
Now I'll speak about the methodology that IGED-Africa uses. So IGED-Africa utilizes sustainable engagement, stakeholder engagement as mentioned earlier, but also policy dialogue, creative peer-to-peer knowledge transfer strategies, practical and hands-on capacity building programs to promote equal access to resources and opportunities for women and men, girls and boys, among others.
Over the years, IGED-Africa has worked in different countries to address the deep-seated discrimination and inequalities that exist between men and women, and particularly those against women and girls.
As a result of patriarchy and marginalization, and specifically raised awareness and empowered women and girls towards the realization of their rights and development in their communities.
IGED-Africa has 4 programmatic areas: Human Rights Program, Women's Economic Empowerment Program, Gender and Development Program, and Good Governance, Peace and Security.
In terms of our engagements with different organizations and institutions, IGED-Africa has worked at different levels, from the national, regional, and also to the international levels.
At the national level, IGED-Africa, with support from UN Habitat and People's Dialogue on Human Settlement, Ghana, empowered and increased the knowledge of over 200 stakeholders in the Central, Greater Accra,
and Northern regions on women's property and inheritance rights in the context of HIV and AIDS in Ghana in 2012.
In 2017, with funding from AWDF, IGED-Africa highlighted discrimination and some forms of violence faced by persons living with disabilities for policymakers' attention.
And it will interest you to also note that from 2013 to 2019, with support from the Global Initiative for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which is actually a partner organization at the time based in the US, and also in partnership with IGED-Africa, we work closely with regional organizations such as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, specifically the Office of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, the chairperson of the Committee on the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and other commissioners on the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to promote the rights of women in Africa.
Different advocacy activities at the ACHPR included leading panel discussions at non-NGO forum, holding strategic side events on women's rights, training and capacity building activities for CSOs on the Maputo Protocol,
presentations of shadow reports to the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, holding working sessions with commissioners and other CSOs, and holding bilateral meetings. These were done all to promote economic, social and cultural rights and women's land and property rights. A major result achieved by IGED-Africa through its engagement with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and with local and regional partners was the adoption of a landmark resolution on the rights of women to land and productive resources, Resolution 262 of the ACHPR.
This resolution is the first of its kind, and I must say that it's actually one of the resolutions that the African Commission is very proud of, and it's on land rights since the inception on the work of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa. IGED-Africa is currently using this resolution for advocacy on the continent, and in collaboration with partners such as the Global Initiative for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Center on Human Rights from the University of Pretoria, Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa, which is based in South Africa, but also the Kenyan Human Rights Commission based in Kenya and FIDA Kenya, IGED-Africa developed and got the general comment on Article 7D of the Maputo Protocol adopted. This general comment is referred to as General Comment number 6 for the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And it is actually a general comment on the Maputo Protocol on Article 7D based on equality in property distribution upon divorce, and this was adopted in 2020.
From 2014, as part of accountability and mechanism, we in collaboration with GIESCR IGED-Africa jointly submitted reports on Ghana to the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and Human Rights Committee, HRC.
The committee concluding observations highlighted most issues raised by IGED-Africa that impact gender equality and women's rights to land, property and inheritance rights, leading to further advocacy work on this.
In a nutshell, IGED-Africa has achieved groundbreaking outcomes and impacts. It's important to mention that our work has actually assumed key regional and international legal frameworks, policy decision-making processes, and has taken to a different level of expanding the work of IGED-Africa on issues related to non-discrimination and gender equality at the regional level, but also at the international level. All in all, we have built and strengthened partnerships with relevant stakeholders. We have worked closely with local, regional, and international partners, and we have achieved groundbreaking continental as well as national processes, procurements of the protection for women's rights to land and productive resources in Africa.
From a gender perspective, we have effectively raised awareness and strengthened knowledge on continental human rights and standards and frameworks.
Currently, with support from SOA Coalition and with financial support from CEDA, IGED-Africa has engaged in strategic advocacy on the Maputo Protocol and advanced new frontiers on gender equality and human rights,
opening new avenues for the enforcement of certain aspects of women's socio-economic rights.
Throughout our work, we played a bridging role to ensure that women's rights advocates have the opportunity and capacity to engage and infuse African regional international human rights laws, protecting gender equality in their work and relevant spaces needed for such issues.
In conclusion, IGED-Africa will continue to work closely on closing the gender equality gap on the continent, we will focus on linking the initiatives at the grassroots level to policy issues, bridging the gap from addressing issues around gender-based violence, reforming national family laws, policies, and addressing issues related to climate change, strengthening frameworks towards conflict prevention, good governance, and promoting women's peace and security agenda on the continent.